Hey, it's simple. You're watching Thorin channel.
Right, to switch up, now we're going to talk for real about esports stuff, right?
Okay.
Let's go into CSGO, let's go in our game. So one area I want to ask a question that's probably going to shock a lot of people because a lot of people just don't know the history, right? I'm not exaggerating when I say you and I essentially created what analyst desks are in CSGO. I'll also give a little bit of credit to Monte Cristo. He did do it in League of Legends, like shortly, like around, just before we did, and he was kind of doing a similar thing. You know, he had a character, or rather he showed his character, he had flair, but more importantly, he wasn't a pro, and yet he had bold opinions about the game. Exactly, by the way, I know a lot of people never understand, this is why I always reference it, is what a pundit is for. Now, unfortunately, in esports, maybe it's the fact it's a new thing, there's so many young people involved, I noticed, by the way, especially with Americans, a lot of them aren't people who had a connection to sports, like they're the nerd, whereas that's a jock thing. So it's one of the weird things that I think never really translated for me across the Atlantic. When they look at what we do though, they can't get past that first part, that part that wasn't a pro. That's like the hurdle they can't ever clear somehow. Because we weren't pros, they think like all we should do on an analyst desk, or even on By the Numbers, is just essentially like report other people's opinions or just say things that are like obvious platitudes, like congrats to the best team that won, you were the best in the field, like some nonsense. So give me your thoughts on how you see when you've done, because obviously we still do it on By the Numbers, but we used to do it a lot on desks, etc. And in the future, maybe you'll come back and be on desks because you started out not as the host. What do you think about that side of it? Because, I mean, listen, it's all well and good that a lot of people have picked up the baton and done good work since, but I feel like that's an area where I got sick after a while of trying to almost compromise by like giving those people their due. Like, yes, well, obviously I wasn't a pro, and this is just my opinion. Eventually I started just thinking, wait a minute, I've watched thousands of hours of Counter-Strike. I even know these fucking players. I have an opinion and it's valid and that's it. So where do you come down on this whole topic?
Well, I mean, first, that's why I started. I would ask like Sean Gares, players in the back, and I would say like, my opinion is he should have done this or he should have done that. And then they would go, yeah, and actually, did you notice he threw that flash? And then I would go and repeat it whole cloth on a broadcast and people would say, you don't know what you're talking about. So you weren't insulting me. You were insulting some of the finest minds in the game. And that just shows how the messenger is often what is judged rather than the message, right? But like, it's very hard to not sound self-aggrandizing because I've already said like, go esports journalist and this great moral crusader. This does sound like I'm just stroking my dick here, so I got to be careful. But the reality was, I think what was different about what we did is we recognized it, and this is a very American ideal when it comes to sports broadcasts, is it's an entertainment product. It's a fucking entertainment product. You got to be having a good time. You got to want to watch it. You got to want to be engaged because, typically what happens in a lot of sports, if you don't have a compelling middle section, a compelling analysis desk, people switch off, they go away, they wait for the game to come back on. No one's really watching it. What I wanted to do was make the analysis desk its own little feature and worth watching in its own instance. And I don't think you get that with just, here's a replay and, oh, look, he's done the thing.
It's very formulaic now, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel in some ways some of the analysis desk segments have gone backwards a little bit because, they don't get the balance right. It's the one criticism I have of the Blast. I think the Blast is like probably the best esports package in CSGO right now.
Sure.
In terms of the overall broadcast quality. But the problem they've got is you've got Maniac and Pimp, two ex-pros who like to go hyper-analytical. Maniac, I would say, being the stronger of the two in that aspect, which, by the way, is obviously always terrible. It's always terrible to be the secondary guy because you're always left having to agree.
Yes.
And so what you need on a desk, I always think, is, you got to have some fucking sizzle on the steak. It's like, if you can't disagree with what Maniac is saying, why can't you throw a little entertaining bomb out there and be like, yeah, but you did used to play with him though, didn't you? So you're going to be biased. And obviously, he's not being biased. His analysis is genuine.
Yeah,
now suddenly, let's get a bit of banter going. Let's get a bit of energy going. And there's nobody who's going to do that over on there. I also think as well, I know that we do the whole two analysts thing. I kind of feel you either need a really strong host who's not afraid to inject a little bit of personality and two analysts, or you do need the three analysts and the host is more in the background. I always thought the stuff we did on ELEAGUE was, the the right balance, because Moses is a great guy. He can mirror, he can do banter, he can do analysis. He has the credibility of having played, even though not to a super high level and not recently. Obviously, you know what you're doing there. And I was always really upset we never got to do the dream desk of you and and Moses, which would have been
That would have been fun for ELEAGUE for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it would have been a fucking it would have been a nightmare for...
Basically, me and Mo would be like Charles Barkley and Shaq, just fucking jabbing at each other. But that would also work in that exact same dynamic, because then if you don't like Mo, I'd be roasting him. If you don't like me, he'd be roasting me. It would work, wouldn't it?
and people don't realise there's nothing wrong with framing the entertainment, part of the broadcast. You've got a game, you've got a game, you've got commentary, right? There's nothing wrong with having the bit in the middle be just an entertainment product where people have fun. And so when we started doing it, I don't even know if we ever really sort of like sat down and talked about it, because it's a long time ago now. But I think we just also tacitly understood this is what Counter-Strike needs, and this is what we're good at.
Yes.
So why wouldn't we do that? So yeah, when we did those desks where it was Scott, you and me, and the Gfinity's Angels, I do feel that was a step in the right direction for what we needed in CS, and I think we would later go on to really nail the formula, starting round about probably coming out of Cluj and Poker in 2015, going into ELEAGUE in 2016. Some of the segments we did for DreamHack, moments where you're smashing a baguette. We're doing prop comedy with fucking Henry G.
True, yeah.
There was... People might look back and say it was cringe or stupid or whatever, but one of the reasons people like CS isn't just because it's easy to watch, it's because there's a bit of rock and roll swagger to it. No one takes it too seriously. We're not all trying to cancel each other. We're all like... we understand that sometimes trash talk can be a bit near the knuckle and go a little bit too far, and when we allow that, we permit our players to do that. We don't crucify them when they go over the line. Most people downvoted and say, shut the fuck up. It's one thing we got in common with Call of Duty. No one's getting cancelled over trash talk over there. Meanwhile, in League of Legends, if someone fucking flips the finger at another player, it's a fucking big drama. They're getting fined, And don't even get me started on Overwatch. So, I wanted to have just a little, not too much, but just a little bit of spice in there, a little bit of WWE stuff. And I think that in Counter-Strike, we nailed that. And then coming out of ELEAGUE, I think we've gone a little bit backwards in the sense that when we put the desks together, it's great the ex-pros have come through. I always said it wouldn't be me forever. It wouldn't be, that makes sense. But when you put two pros together and they're both in agreement and they're pretty not dry personalities, but you know what I mean. That they don't chuck the hand grenade in the room just to see what happens. I think those desks are unbelievably dry, and it really sells Counter-Strike short. And I think a lot of people don't even watch them as much as they used to now.
Along the lines of this topic, though, one of the reasons I actually know why even some of the people who are on these desks, I have to say, one thing that's really been pissing me off the last 3 months is that Pimp keeps getting embroiled in these dramas where people are acting like he's said the sort of shit I would say.
He's just a new Semler of C. He's just a new Semler. He's just going to get wrecked for whatever.
This is the crazy thing, though. He's never even saying what they said. He's, again, as you say, I'm agreeing. I think he's too timid sometimes. I've always encouraged him to go harder. So I worry that actually I look at these people getting backlash. So it leads into another topic that I know right now is absolutely on your mind. You've made a couple of pieces about it. We talked about by the numbers. Is one of the reasons people don't want to do that, even people who are ex-pros, is the pros also have a megaphone and they don't mind fucking popping off it in an instant. Again, oftentimes, I thought actually one of the most magnanimous gestures was when I did my reflections with Get Right. I asked him about this topic at the beginning of the show, and even though he could have said stuff like, well, you were too harsh, he just basically said, us pros are just really crybabies, aren't we? The idea was, even if they know it's true, they just don't want you to say it and they don't want you to say it publicly.
That's an interesting example because I know from talking to Christopher and obviously you know him, we've known him for years. There's no bad blood there at all. I think he always felt a little bit bad about saying, it's Thorin, so he doesn't know what he's talking about, kind of like what Issa did recently. Because I think it was coming from a place of banter, and it was almost like an acknowledgement, proved you wrong type.
It was just mildly dismissive, yeah. I didn't see it at the time as some like statement. I thought it was, what he thinks,
but the community seized upon it and turned it into something it wasn't. And I think that's why he wanted to address it in that interview and just say, like, once and for all, like, it's just what players do when they come under fire and they're criticised. They take a swing back and very often do it in a silly way that's, unsustainable.
Because basically, the reason why I bring it up is, listen, I've had that my whole career, because obviously the other thing about that is I lean into it. Like, as I said earlier, listen, first of all, I'm in for a scrap. That's just my life. And then secondly, I used to have just the one-sided version of that where the player would say the shit and I couldn't even fire back. But I know in your case, especially because with Deserto, you've now moved into a lot of like opinion pieces about the game, like hot take reaction stuff. That's, you're crafting this. Players are not happy with some of this, and especially it's not just pros. Obviously, their fan bases come. Like, what do you think on this angle? Because like it's basically just another shitstorm you have to deal with now.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't hold the players accountable for what their fans do. I'll never do that. I think that's a really unfair standard. Unfortunately, in any fandom, by definition, you're going to have deeply unwell and disturbed people that are over-invested in whatever it is they're a fan of. And those people are potentially a danger to themselves and others because, who knows how far they're going to take it. But you can't be held accountable for that. You don't know how many fans you've got. You don't know what percentage of them are going to be dangerous and say, disgusting things on the internet and go and harass people. I don't even think you have an obligation, because I think it should be tacitly understood. I don't think you have an obligation to say, please don't harass people after you give an opinion, because why are you harassing people for an opinion about that person? That should be the rule, not the fucking exception. So I almost feel when you get mind fucked into saying, please don't harass people, like, you're almost acknowledging you have that kind of power.
Agreed. Yes, that's why I don't say it. I just assume it's understood that I'm not saying to do it, so you make your own fucking mind up.
Yeah, exactly. That means all the other times you didn't say it, you wanted it to happen. So now, fuck playing that game. That's another little head game that the cancellers want to play with. I tell my community, they know where I stand on this. No one should be being harassed on the internet. One of the reasons why I make a joke of mine, even though it's some pretty heinous death and rape threats and everything else that I get on the regular basis, one of the reasons I make it public and sort of like play it off as a bit of fun is because I think it holds a mirror up to my own community, my fans, and they say, holy shit, I would never behave like that. And here's Richard, again, it's understood I am condemning it by poking fun at it, but without making myself a mad victim. I'm never going to be crying like, look at these threats I've had to get. Like, obviously, they're all patently absurd. And it has got dark sometimes, and you know about the time at ELEAGUE with the security guards. You know about the Boston Major and how that went down. And, the death threats and having to deal with the head of fucking corporate security and everything else. But at the end of the day, like in general, it's just a lot of chatter and noise on the internet from people who've got nothing else, so it's not the be all and end all. So I don't blame the players for that. I understand as well when the only players can clap back and say, his opinion doesn't count. It's all fine. Just don't call me a liar and say what the fuck you want. And I'm all right with that. And I also understand, I think, while we're not as sophisticated as the Call of Duty guys, in Counter-Strike, I think we're getting there now, where it's a little bit of a nudge, nudge, wink, wink, let's get some content. Let's be real. Let's look at the CIS one now, right? So we did a podcast where we give opinions. We gave opinions. Those opinions made, inaccurate representations of those opinions made, there was 6 posts in CIS news sites about it, which prompted CIS figureheads to subtweet, they didn't have the balls to do it directly, but start talking about us, which then prompted influencers in that region to make YouTube videos about us, which sent a deluge of fans our way, many of them very angry about the things we didn't say. But within that, there was also a lot of fans who were going, yeah, it's terrible in the CIS region. I'm a Gambit fan. The bias towards Na'Vi in the media is outrageous. Or I'm embarrassed by the CIS region. And you want to know what's mad? Against all of the odds, despite having like negative ratios on that episode of the podcast and all that negative publicity, Twitter followers up, YouTube followers up, revenue on the videos up, more people looking at my shit, and CIS people who can speak English, fluently, coming over and checking out my stuff. And then I get to make a video about it. I get to make a live stream about it. Maybe someone will respond to that. There's nothing wrong with this. This is the game. And, I'm not saying anything disingenuous.
Just keep it clean in terms of the truth.
Yeah, exactly. As long as it's true, we can do this. And I hope people realise as well, even in what I said about Na'Vi, and we clarified this on the last episode of BTN, I've got nothing against Blade. I just don't think he's doing a great job as a coach right now. I think that's it. Seems a super cool guy. I've got nothing against Boomich. Seems like a really good kid. I think he's playing really well. Drop Flamey, move Boomich into Flamey's role or a similar role, and bring in a real IGL maybe. That's all I'm saying. I just want Simple to win trophies at the end of the day. I'm actually rooting for Na'Vi on some level. So it seems crazy that we're at loggerheads, and I feel that just got lost in translation mostly. Which is another thing when you're dealing with, such a vastly different language, Cyrillic, mistakes happen. So no hard feelings from me at any of the players. Although, when you see some of those ex-Na'Vi players and what a bunch of scumbags they are, obviously, I'll call them out, but legends in the game, never going to take that away from them.
One thing I wanted to ask about was, I'll frame it very interestingly, because obviously you've made a lot of content about your time when you were at E-League and afterwards and things that went on. But one thing I wanted to ask was this. One of the reasons I actually wanted to be involved with Flashpoint specifically was because when I'd worked, not just on other TOs, specifically on E-League, and you're thinking, fuck, I'm here. I'm in a real TV studio. I'm literally where they make fucking Inside the NBA. Surely now's when, if I give these guys the good ideas and I give them the extra things we can do and the side stuff, it could happen. It's not just a dream anymore. One of the things I found underwhelming, and I know it was something even though you got to have input on some things, was an issue for you, as you've alluded to before, you still want to do the documentaries the right way, is that E-League was different because it was a real TV show. They had very strict constraints. And also, if people don't know, it's part of the reason CSGO isn't really on it anymore. It was a loss leader. It wasn't something that they really gave a fuck. Yeah. It's never going to be successful in the traditional metrics and make money. Therefore, I get why they didn't buy into the vision. So I thought at Flashpoint, right, if I really do get to be the creative director, I get to actually see how the talent things and how the desk's set up and what additional side things. Now, as I pointed out in my video, for understandable reasons, some of that stuff got handicapped and you never actually even got to see it. So unfortunate. But even just the premise of being able to do it was exciting to me. What would you say on that angle? Because I know that while on the one hand you are definitely proud of the work you did at E-League and you were there for quite a considerable tenure doing all these multiple different games. Sure, it ended acrimoniously in terms of the fact that you sort of left because the people were such cunts to you in terms of random fans from the fighting game community, not necessarily E-League. What were the challenges or the disappointments of E-League though? Where did it, was there a world where we could have ascended through E-League and done other things through there?
I think we were just a little bit too soon. I think if E-League had started in 2018 with everything that was going on in the industry rather than 2016, I think it probably, but the metrics by which they were judging success, I think it succeeds to a much greater degree. It's Windows, for timing of creating things, very difficult to judge when you're dealing with unstable markets, geopolitical factors, economic factors. Our industry's all over the fucking place at the best of times, where you've got very credible voices saying it's a bubble that's going to pop any time and we're all going to be bankrupt, and you've got other people saying it's going straight to the fucking moon,
Yes.
GameStop stock or whatever. So, and both of these people are as kind of equally informed. So who the fuck knows really what's going on? We've got different opinions, I think, a little bit about where it's at, but ultimately, I definitely think at the time E-League jumped in, it was just a little bit too ahead of its time. Not by much, but a little bit too much. Because the first thing it really achieved, and the thing that everyone has to be, recognize this, is the level of production forced everyone else to raise their game. Everyone. Think about if you go and look at what the average esports broadcast looked like in 2015, and then you compare it to what we were doing in E-League, and subsequently what ESL did and what everyone else tried to do. E-League did that, right? No doubt. The days of, not having super cool graphics and stingers and nice stages, all of that was gone, So then the other thing it did was looking after players and making players feel like rock stars, making esports players feel actually legitimized. Because let's also be real, even in 2015, you know, people were still trying to nickel and dime you, make you share a hotel room with a teammate, right? You know,
Yes.
You certainly didn't have a goodie bag and, you know, a limo driving you to and from the events. We did all that. A tournament organizer actually called us up and said you're treating the players disproportionately well, and it's causing issues.
Oh, I've got a great one for you.
Yeah,
just in the context of what's going on at the moment, I've never said this publicly. It's not the end of the world. It's not something that was like super in confidence, because I won't reveal who said it. I actually got told by, of all people, a CIS tournament organizer that they actually hoped that tournaments like ELEAGUE not only failed but would never exist anymore, so that the rates in the industry and how you treated the talent and how the players were expected. They genuinely said it, Rich. They weren't like, they almost said it like not knowing they sound like the villain when they said that. Like,
yeah, no, but like, so you know, there was a lot of that. There was a lot of that attitude, and it wasn't just limited to the CIS region. I can tell you that firsthand. There were a lot of people who were, industry people who supposedly claim they want the best for the industry and want it to grow, who were saying what we were doing was like unsustainable. Of course, they were all able to get up to our level when we said we're not budging on it. You know, we're not going to lower our standards to make yours look comparatively better. Why the fuck would we do that? So, you know, equally though, we definitely contributed to this culture of greed and diva-ish nonsense that we're seeing from players now. We were a big part of that. Maybe that's a downside. I don't know. Maybe that's on the players. But, you know, yeah, there were disappointments. I mean, I remember sitting down and scripting a bunch of documentaries out, like just basically like what you would do a treatment of a book or a movie, you know, all the key scenes, all, you know, a synopsis. And I did that for like 5 or 6, and I wanted these to be ESPN 30 for 30 history of CSGO kind of pieces, picking up interesting stories that would transcend the niche aspect of what we do and just be a good human interest story. Like, for me, the best 30 for 30 sports documentaries are the ones that are in really weird niche scenes, or are in a country you might not know too much about, or a sport you don't follow, but the story transcends it. Like, there's one about in the latest series, there's one about fucking eating contests and a rivalry that too, you know, how's that compelling, you know, but it is. So you can take something as wild and, you know, hard to understand to an outsider as esports, but still tell really interesting stories, because we got dozens of insane stories in our field and ones that haven't been told. And that's what I wanted to do ultimately. I wanted ELEAGUE to be, yes, a tournament. Yes, we would host the majors. Yes, we would be a regular weekly TV show where enthusiasts could tune in, watch multiple games. But also, I wanted us to graduate to the real shit. You know, that had to be the goal. But unfortunately, because it was a loss leader, you know, I had talks with executives where I was expressing my frustrations, and they basically said, you know, we've got to find a way to make this, you know, we're at the stage now where we've got to find a way to start making this more profitable and how we package it. We got to work smarter. It can't be what it was in the past. And, you know, we need to work smarter on it as a product. And that wasn't a factor in why I left. I would have been, I would have been there till the end, you know, I would have been there until it got cancelled. It's still going in some form over there.
Sure.
And, you know, it would have been me hosting The Sims 4 tournaments or whatever. They literally just did a series on that. And I would have done it because I loved working with those people. I loved working with all of the guys over there. And if we could have kept that crew together, I'd have stayed. But there was just stuff going on in my life at the time. And the stress, you know, I can't tell you, I can't explain what it's like to have people literally saying they want to kill you for opinions you don't hold, but because they've been told by somebody else that they respect, you do hold those opinions. And you've got people, you know, messaging my direct bosses, you know, how can somebody of Jewish heritage have a Nazi on a broadcast? That was one, you know. And you know, you get dozens of these emails all the time. Pressure from the studios that made the games. We think he's too divisive. We want to pull him off the pull them off air, you know. Yeah, and you know, we had to stop doing the fan meetups, security detail, and then that bled over into other games. Like the one event I should be able to go to, I mean, probably not true anymore, but the one esport event I should be able to go to and feel relatively safe is a CS event. Like surely there's enough people that can have some level of respect for what I did. Well, no, as you saw, it bled over into the Boston Major. You know, one of the high points of my career, one of the high points of my life, pulling off that.
Just to clarify, by the way, because again, this is where someone who has 10 followers and doesn't know what they're talking about but decides to wade in thinks that you're just talking now about an account that had like a Donald Duck avatar that said, I kill you, bitch. Like, give them a sense of like, what are you talking about here in terms of people say things?
People would send death threats on Twitter and, you know, I would get like so many of them. It got to a stage where it was actually now mandated I had to pass them on because there's a liability issue, you know, like obviously if somebody comes to attack me and I get hurt and other people get hurt because of that and I didn't pass on that information, you know, I've been negligent. So the security at Turner, which was great, you know, they deal with all the celebrity security and think about how many basket cases gravitate towards, you know, basketball players and stuff. So they were like, you know, you got to start letting us know about these things. And every time I did, they would use their connections to basically run checks on these people. And I think like 3 of the threats in the time I was there came back as being deemed credible, believable threats of violence. That, you know, there was reason to believe that with these people's history, criminal record, you know. And when we got to Boston, you know, there was somebody had said, I am going to drive to the Boston Major and shoot Richard Lewis in the head on air. That was that. You know, I don't know if you remember, but we had to do all of the fucking, you know, drills. We did shooting drill, bomb scare drill, you know. And I'm looking around watching the rest of the crew having to go through this. We had to do a day on security protocol. And that's just because I'm at the show.
Right, yeah.
And it's not a good feeling. It's not a good feeling when I'm, you know, stood next to Smix, who's never done anything to anyone.
Yes.
And we're having to do, and if a shooter comes in and this happens, and that's on me. That she's now stressed, thinking there could be a plausible danger or whatever, you know. So it was really hard. It was hard not to do fan interactions, as all the fans who were there can attest to. You know, I was literally shadowed by...
By the way, that sounds like something else that I don't think you've ever overtly said, but that's another issue that... This is the weird thing. Obviously, we are human. We have our pressure points. It's just, it wouldn't actually, it's funny, it wouldn't be what our enemies would expect because they're so reductive. They think we're just like heartless pieces of shit.
Of course, yeah.
So the funny thing is, they don't know. The classic pressure point's obvious. It's the people around us who are more vulnerable. Yeah. Because I'll tell you what, when you said that about Smix, the first thing I always think, it's one of the things I always think when I see Smix, unfortunately, is you know what? Obviously, that joke I did was off colour. Shouldn't have done it. It was a fucked up one. I apologised for it the day after about the Luminosity players back at MLG Columbus. What I actually really felt really bad about beyond that, though, because listen, once you've said your apology, that's it. It's the end of the world. You know, you move on. It was the fact that I basically drew her into it, and in some way, because I made her part of the joke, and she hadn't said that. Now idiots could imply she had said. So I know
and
that's one.
You know,
yeah, but so I know that's one thing about ELEAGUE. That listen, you can handle them being arseholes, whatever, even to some degree, sending you death threats, but. I'm sure eventually it even just gets like almost embarrassing that your own boss, even if your boss is like, listen, I know they're all nonsense emails they're sending. Eventually you just feel like I'm just a burden if I keep doing this, you know. Was there some of that?
Oh, of course, yeah. I mean, you know, it's fucking. I'm not worried so much about like, you know, the almost like social embarrassment aspects. Let's just say if one day somebody does do something like that, and then I'm stood in the wrong place at the wrong time, and someone else gets hurt, you know, that's the thing.
Sure.
That's the thing that would prey on my mind. That this is, you know, how we're living because some guy is upset about something I've said about a video game. You know, once those liars and the bullshit artists brought politics to the table and started saying, oh, he's a Nazi, you know, he's right wing, he's a fascist, you know, don't hold any sort of conceivable view that would get me invited to CPAC, right? You know, don't have any views like that, and don't, you know, but whatever. You know, once that lie gets introduced, people are willing to kill you for politics.
Yes,
you know,
different game.
Yeah, and that's what I was being held up as. I was being held up as an extreme right-wing figure who had infiltrated video games and was using it as a radicalization pipeline. You know, that was the lie. And so, yeah, someone will come and shoot you in the head for that, evidently. And, you know, that was what I had to think about. And then you got people who just want to talk about video games, as I do most of the time. And that was the worry. You know, because you would have been mortified, you know, if someone got hurt because someone was trying to get to you, like that.
Sure.
That, you know, the guilt that's going to get on top of you. But, yeah, I mean, you know, obviously that was the mad stress. That was why I couldn't re-sign for ELEAGUE. I literally couldn't do that anymore. I just couldn't.
By the way, you know, it's obviously to refer back to it, maybe it'll be part one if I split this video up. When we talked about the people who try to cancel the idea, a classic lie that even people who in theory are credible journalists say, it was said about me and you very recently, is that the way you know they can never give us our due is they have to say that we were fired from all these places. Yeah. If we ever left, even though, by the way, they haven't thought it through logically, with the kind of people we are, people who some people do hate, and people who certainly do things that can be deemed controversial just because how ridiculously constricted the consensus is on what you're allowed to say. You know, I'm sure some of these sites, if they wanted to get some clout, if they fired you for real, they'd just publicly do it, or they'd make sure people got the information. Does that bother you that people try to claim that you were fired? Like, for example, obviously they try to claim that you didn't leave ELEAGUE out of choice. They just told you, you know, get the fuck out.
Yeah, I mean, only in the sense that it's false, and the idea, like, one of the reasons why that lie is important to a lot of people is it suggests they wield power. You see. They are essentially saying, you know, this person we've identified as being bad, we've said he's bad, and everyone knows it now. And ELEAGUE fired him because of what we said. No, fuck that. I left. I made a life improving choice at that time, because I was unbelievably stressed. I mean, you know, I'm under no illusions. Like, between 2016 and now, the aging process I've gone through, because all the stressful things that have happened in my life, my personal life, obviously losing the visa, having to move out of America, heading straight into the pandemic, plus all the stuff at ELEAGUE, and just learning about the kind of dark, sinister face of what genuine life-threatening harassment looks like, not your fucking fake stuff that you can never produce receipts for when you're one of these online culture warriors. You know, that was like, enough was enough. It was also as well, like, on some level, and I've been honest about this, you walk a tightrope. I was the face of ELEAGUE, and I was essentially, you know, they were talking about keeping me on at the TV network. Even if ELEAGUE failed, they were going to try and find something else for me to do because they like me. But that also means I am one tweet, one opinion. Sure. One. You only even have to phrase an idea poorly these days to get fired. It can be like you can blurt something out and then expand on it. But the clip is of you blurting out the opinion and saying, well, I didn't mean it like that. What I meant was, you're not even allowed that. You're not even allowed to fully clarify what you meant anymore. So, you know, it could have ended any second. It could have all been taken away from me at any second. So I'm living in that environment, plus the product and the work, plus the threats, plus the fact that next up was more FGC events. We'd booked another 2 FGC events in just before I had my contract negotiations. And I'm just thinking, fucking hell. You know, because it was great TV. But every time that happened, the same fucking, you know, empty, spineless talking heads would be saying, oh, there he is. There's the Nazi again. I'll tell you again. When are we going to bloody stop putting Nazis on television? You know, people sending me pictures. This you? And it's like Richard Spencer. Like, what? Where is this coming from? You know? And I was like, I can't go through that for another 2 events. The 10% pay rise you're offering me, while generous, is, you know, is not going to cut it. Because I'll lose my fucking mind.
By the way, one other topic I had on that before we move on, I don't want to make it a massive saga. I just want a quick clarification on this one, because I think this was really shocking to me. Like, listen, I've known most of the stories in your career and what's going on and who's saying what and stuff. But the one that blew my mind, because obviously I don't care about fighting games, so I wasn't super hooked in on that. I only basically saw it through, the stuff you tweeted and the videos you did. The one that actually shocked me to my core was when I found out that some of the people who were literally your desk analysts were engaged in, like, encouraging that behaviour.
Yeah.
Like real esports figures in those games.
Ultra David was the guy that where I realised that, like, it's absolutely pointless to even, engage with these people in good faith. He was a guy who obviously is well liked by the community, loves fighting games. There's no doubt in his, commitment. And because I was the host, one of my duties was basically I got to assemble the crew. I had veto if anybody wasn't going to cut it, or we didn't think it was going to vibe. I think people saw I did a good enough job in the past, like recommendations and getting people on and fighting for certain people to be on a broadcast. My entire reputation was on the line when I brought Mo in, for example, to replace you while we were waiting on your visa. He'd never done a broadcast before, let alone American television. And he was a guy who had all these skeletons in his car, and I just said, listen, I know Mo. He will be entertaining. Trust me. And of course, he was brilliant. They wanted to keep him on, and then he fucked that up with that whole CSGO Diamonds fiasco. So anyway, I had a lot of good faith built up. And so they came to me and said, listen, Ultra David, they went through his tweets and saw that he'd had some tweets at me and insulted me and stuff. And I said, listen, he's a good guy. He's liked by the community. I got no beef with it at all. And so we were doing rehearsals, and he made a joke at my expense on the rehearsal, and everyone was like laughing and stuff, And he came up to me after we'd done the bit, and he said, "Is that all right?" And I went, "Yeah, fuck yeah, it's brilliant. We want banter, mate. So leave that in when we do the real show. So, keep a mental note of that. That's gold. People will be expecting a bit of friction, a bit of banter. So let's definitely go with that." And then when he said it on the show, and it was live. Loads of the gremlins from the FGC who were going, "Oh, I can't believe Ultra David just burnt Richard Lewis," and he completely played up that he'd done it like apropos,
right.
Caught me off guard, it wasn't rehearsed, and I knew right then he was a fucking fake.
Because online he was always fronting as if like, and I even tell him this shit when I'm at, he was doing that sort of vibe.
Meanwhile, we were having dinner and hanging out, almost every night that he was there.
Hell.
And he'd be going, I just don't get why people don't get you. If you could just tone down your Twitter, I'm sure more and more people would like you. And then as soon as the broadcast was over, he went and told everyone I was a cunt. And then on top of that was like, when people tweet at me, Richard Lewis is a fascist arsehole who must be stopped, and I would like retweet it. He would go, I don't know why Richard's like this. He's dogpiling you. It's so bad. Like, yeah, I'm the bad guy in that, am I? So, yeah, at that point, and the other thing that really hurt was basically when people that I thought were my mates, and, I got all those guys like Christmas presents, used to take them out for dinner when we were at Atlanta and stuff, genuinely happy to see them. Those guys basically didn't want to come and meet me during one FGC event where, again, I was told literally I couldn't attend this event in Atlanta because it was outside of ELEAGUE and therefore security couldn't be there. And people had said, if you go, we're going to fuck you up. So I said, right, I won't go. I'll follow the advice of the security people. And we'll just meet for dinner. And the guys that I'd literally vouched for turned around and said, yeah, we can't really do it, mate. If anyone sees us, it's too hot. Couldn't even have dinner with these people. So I was like, all right, fine. It is what it is. So, I mean, that sucks, but I'm a big boy. So,
Fair enough.
Yeah, not gonna cry too much about it. As I said, all the real stressful factors was the stuff that sort of false presentation of who I am generated, because obviously as well it was a very charged atmosphere politically coming after the Trump election, and so anybody that was kind of put on that side of the yard was considered dangerous, radical, Nazi, and it would just be the same thing over and over and over again, just the regurgitation of these things happened, but they've been dealt with. The Loader incident. Yeah, 6 months at Breitbart. Yeah, I get it. Yeah, now what? And so every time it would get brought up, and it was just ridiculous. I mean, I had a chronic stomach ulcer at the time. I mean, people can probably see, I was a lot fatter. I'm still out of shape now. America hit me like a fucking ton of bricks, mate. But I puffed up really badly and got very doughy. And that was a combination I was on medication for a chronic stomach ulcer because of the stress. And plus the boozing I was doing, which was exacerbating the ulcer. And then to try and soak up the acid when the medication weren't working, I was like comfort eating. So I was a fucking physical wreck as well as a mental one. And I was like, I'm gonna fucking die if I keep living like this. I'm just gonna do a Gandolfini. I'm just gonna keel over one day while some cunt's threatening me in public, And that's why I had to leave. And as I said earlier, these people find it essential to frame it that we were fired because then it validates what they say. ELEAGUE couldn't believe it. They had the contract, they slipped it across the table with a pen and started talking to me about something else. They were utterly convinced I was going to resign and couldn't believe it when I said, I can't do this. I'm sorry, guys. They tried to convince me to stay. It was another 2-year extension. Put it this way. If in any way I'd been fired, don't you think for like liability issues, legal issues, they would have put that out as a statement saying we are terminating Richard Lewis's contract. Not to mention, you get a positive PR hit from all the morons cheering up.
They even do it with some of the big name commentators in sports. I notice. Yeah, you just say it. You just say we're not renewing
his contract. Yeah, exactly. But no, they didn't do that. They really wanted me to stay. And everybody I worked with there liked me. Like, everyone was really disappointed, but I went in and told everybody, like, I got to bounce. Like, I can't keep doing this to myself. I've got things that I need to think about, and yeah, I got to go do something else, unfortunately. And then,
right, speaking of the other thing you did then, right, this is the part where I'm sure CSGO fans are going to think, oh, come on, skip this part. Like the WSOE had nothing to do with CSGO and that. But the reason I want to ask about that is it's the opposite of what I was going to ask about with ELEAGUE, where it was like, everyone knows the upside. So what were the challenges and stuff with WSOE? Because if you're from CSGO, you were like, well, they never did anything in CSGO really anyway. And it was like, what, the fucking daughter event at PUBG event. It was games that other people don't give a fuck about. I also myself wondered, what is going on with this thing here? Yeah. Like, I will say, I can totally understand the concept of the project because, again, it was a chance to do way more expanded level of creative control. It looked like you were having even more direct say in the talent hires and these, some of the things you wanted to do. But one thing I wanted to ask was this, is that seems like a project from the outside, at least, that just never fully got off the ground in terms of how long you were there. You weren't there long enough, right? So what was actually the goal of what WSOE could have been, and would Counter-Strike have been a part of it?
So there's loads of little stories which, not that, because it's like such a minor footnote in esports, I guess. They're probably not even interested to tell right now, but maybe one day. But, basically we'd got, so I was heading out of ELEAGUE, and then I got a call from a friend who said, I'm working on a startup. We got some money from, I think it was one of the big poker companies out in Vegas, and they want to move into esports, and, we're going to do all this stuff. We've already got people attached to the project, like the director, Loy, who's a guy, miss him, he was fucking insane. Used to piss me off at the time, but, the work was always good by the end of it. Difficult director because he would actually direct you. But he'd done Super Bowls. He directed a fucking Super Bowl for Fox News, and he was coming to do esports events. He had unbelievably high standards, but it showed in the final product. So we had him attached, and then I looked at the guy who was coming in, who was going to run the whole thing. It was a guy from Amazon called Jeff, really smart dude, really cool dude. And David Lee, former ESL guy, knew him going way back. So I was like, these are legit people. This is an interesting, cool project. They showed me what the brief was going to be. And essentially what we were going to create originally was a UFC-style event hosted in Vegas where it's big money matches. So, we crown a champion. Sick. Yeah, we crown a champion. And then the whole point is we have a ladder and people call each other out. And then we set up the fucking match. All right, let's awesome. Do it here in Vegas. So it was something a bit different. That was going to be the plan. Unfortunately, we never got to the stage where we even had crowned all the champions in each game. And we realized very quickly the format was going to be, a sort of nightmare to execute. And so we put out, I think, some great broadcasts. Like if you go ask about us in PUBG, they were begging us to do another event. I don't even know why we never got to do another one. That might have been the developer. That might have been fucking Blue Hole or whatever they're called. Mightn't have liked someone that we did. But, I had loads of mad ideas for that. Like one of the things I wanted to do, and this didn't get approved. But I was like, let's get, right, because there's a influencer called Donut Operator. I call him an influencer now, but basically he rose to prominence. He was like a former SWAT, officer. And basically he had done, he'd been there, lived that life. He does YouTube videos breaking down police tactics. He calls out when police are bad. He and points out when there's maybe misconceptions in police and methodology. Obviously, that alone is now like the most
as it is. Well, as it, yeah, I know.
But this was 2018.
Sure.
And one of the things I wanted to do was, because he played PUBG as well, was get him on to talk about like little tactical aspects,
right,
and sort of the parallels between doing, clearing a room, clearing a building, and what you might really have to do in that. Now, basically, that got vetoed on the basis that the having video games linked to even sort of sanctioned real life violence is a terrible idea, Richard.
Right.
And you're crazy, but they were letting us try and do all this like interesting creative stuff, which I think would have been really cool. And we did do a bunch of stuff. I mean, remember we had Bruce Buffer do all of our official intros, all of all of that. It was absolutely incredible. I got to work with him, got to hang out with him at a Fortnite event. Super cool guy. I think the events we did were really high quality events, and we dealt some mad challenges, like fucking in Fortnite, they literally introduced a new item the day before our tournament went live, the fucking boombox.
Right.
And notoriously in Fortnite, when a new item comes out, it's broken as shit. And in some cases, literally breaks the game when you use it. As happened with the boombox, it would break the servers when people put it down on tall buildings because it would smash through all the buildings. So,
right.
So we overcome a bunch of challenges on the fly because we had really smart people. So it's a shame it never got going. I basically left because, there was a guy there at the company who, and again, we don't need to get into his names. People will probably know who he is. But he was linked to a lot of shady shit. And he'd pissed me off because he kept trying to do my job, in particular at a daughter event, where my job was to pick the talent for the broadcast. And I took 2 weeks off, came back, and got told this is the talent for the broadcast. And I said, I haven't approved any of this. And he was just doing this thing because he's a notorious fanboy. He's not at the company no more. But he's one of these esports grifters who they use their job in the industry, like Meet Ninja.
Yes.
Let's have a business meeting. Will you sign this? And it's like, it's almost cringeworthy. So this guy was doing all that. And then a video came out. He'd been involved in some shady shit before that couldn't be explained. And I said to the guys, I was like, listen, I've also got a feeling that we're not quite meeting up to the expectations of what we set ourselves, and maybe this project doesn't have a long-term survival rate. But I can't be in a company with a guy like that when my entire brand for my entire esports life is integrity. So we need to come up with a plan here. And basically, in the end, the plan was I had a clause in my contract where I could leave and take a payout. So I just did that. Just seemed like the easiest thing to do.
Right, you told the story, this is going to be one of the last questions, on By the Numbers, about how the reason you're back in the UK is because, well, not only because of the Trump administration making it way hard to get the green cards, but then obviously now there's the whole thing where you can't fucking go anywhere anyway, it turns out. But if people don't know, again, it wasn't bravado. I mean, you've just said it straight up to me when we were at ELEAGUE. Like, I used to obviously go back to my home at the time I was in either the UK or in fucking Korea or whatever. I'm trying to think what time frame this is. I would go back there and then I would come out for, the season of ELEAGUE. So I'd come out for 2 months or a month or whatever it was. You just lived there the whole time. You lived in there for many, many years. You were established there. You even had almost like a household there. You had your life was just there. And I remember you telling me essentially, I'm never going back. I'm just not ever going back to the UK. It's not, it's not
just like Heat.
Sort of, yeah. And in this,
but I did go back.
But in this scenario, you had no choice. You literally had to, unless you wanted to remain illegally in America. So listen, I know you can roll with the punches. You have to do that in this job anyway. But how much of your plans for life did that throw off course that suddenly you had to go back to the UK? And now, I mean, who knows? Maybe it's just the UK for a few years now, right?
I mean, yeah, I think on the one hand, there's a little bit of serendipity to it because America's lost its goddamn mind.
The time to be there now, is it? So
they're becoming a deeply unserious people, and you know, until that illusion and, you know, the constant moral panic and hysteria is punctured, it's not even a pleasant environment to kind of exist in. But, you know, look, I'd rolled the dice on startups before. Remember, ELEAGUE was a startup, WSOE was a startup. I made a lot of money off those projects. I gained a lot of status and a lot of clout off those projects. Made a lot of contacts. Have a lot of cool experience. I rolled the dice again because I had a friend who was on the board, and I had a meeting and an interview, and they promised me the six-figure. You know what? The guy who was running it all, who's a fucking piece of shit, who will get called out by name probably soon. I'll write an article about it. You know, he promised me everything to my face. Said we were going to make the Vice. We were going to make the Vice of, you know, now the new one isn't ESPN anymore. Remember when Vice was cool? We're going to do the Vice of esports this time.
It's the idea that's their dated example now, even though that's like 10 plus years old, Smitten, I know.
Yeah. So, you know, that's what they promised me. Six-figure salary, budget of millions. I think I'd even talked to you about it and some other...
Yeah, potentially other people could come on board. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
A lot of potential, like, agency, basically, right?
Yeah. So that was the plan. And then they'd never hired anyone that needed a visa before. And I got RFE'd again, a request for further evidence, which just happens as a matter of course now if you get an exception.
I've had two of them, so yeah. Basically, yeah.
It's just what they do now. They super scrutinize all of the applications.
I've heard it even happens to a bunch of the League of Legends pros until like Riot themselves literally sort of like pulled some sort of fucking rank. So yeah, it's not, if people are wondering, that's nothing wrong with Richard's visa. It's just happening to everyone, basically.
Exactly. And so... well, no, it literally is the mandate now for exceptional persons visas. They RFE you. They have, you know, because the idea is, you know, America first, American jobs first, you know.
Yes.
It's been a bit loose in the past. Probably some people had exceptional persons visas that don't really qualify.
Almost certainly, yeah.
Fuck it, I might even be one of them, who knows? So anyway, it took so long for the visa to get through. By the time it did, some of the funds they thought were nailed on hadn't materialized. And then the COVID thing was looming. And so they basically turned around and said, like, listen, we need you to just change your role. Well, first they were just like, yeah, we're not going to take you on. And I said, well, you definitely need to do that because we've just gone through and got a visa for me. Then it was, we need you to re-sign your contract and take on this role. And they offered me something derisory, like $30,000 a year. I'll get a fucking McDonald's job for that, you know. And basically this was like applying all this other stress about, you know, what's going to happen if this company goes under. But that was nothing. I mean, like, you know, I probably would have left America anyway after Maria passed away because it was just, you know, like you said, I had a household, I had a life, I had a family, essentially. And, you know, that went in an instant. And then, you know, losing the job after that was just like, honestly, who gives a fuck? You know, I was all, you know, there was it didn't even sort of register. It was just an inconvenience, and it was an inconvenience that was so immediate because they had 60 days to get out of the country, essentially. When they said, you know, we're officially closing down. It was an inconvenience that kind of like masked the, you know, took your mind off the grief because you know the survival instinct was there. Like, if I don't get all my shit together and don't get it shipped out of the country, and, you know, don't figure out where I'm gonna live and don't figure out what I'm gonna do next, you know, I'm gonna fucking, you know, wither on the vine and die. So, you know, I got through a period where I realized, you know, I was gonna choose life. I was gonna look to do something else, and, you know, that you know, it was just a byproduct, essentially. Yeah, didn't have a job, no biggie. I knew as soon as I got back to the UK, if I wanted to work, I could. If I never wanted to work again, I could get away with that. So yeah, I mean, in retrospect, honestly, like as stressful as it all was, it was just masked by this far worse thing that had happened to me just before, and so as a result, it sort of barely even registered, really, you know.
Right. One other thing, since I referenced him earlier, that actually you share with Christopher Hitchens is if people don't know, he is someone who also uprooted his entire life from the UK, could live anywhere in the world, by the way. He's a sort of person who could get these visas at fucking with ease.
Yeah.
Went to America, openly embraced America. He loved the idea of America. Basically, a lot of it was the dream of it, you know, but like the idea of the freedom and it's a new country and we can establish these things that, you know, we don't have in some of the decaying sort of ex-empires, etc. Right? You share a lot of that with him. And I know up until at least a lot of the political shit went way out of control, you were fucking loving it. You were all in on living there. So being as, like, now it doesn't really look like, first of all, we can't go back now anyway, but it also doesn't really look like it's like what you wanted exists now. Is there a world where A, America's on the cards in the future, and then B, I know you said some of it on By the Numbers, but even if it's just vaguely, give us some thoughts on like where's Richard Lewis going in this year, next year, where like for the short term future.
I mean, I don't know, man. Like I said, I think the next thing I need to do is I need to get something of some permanence down, because the worry is that, you know, and I kind of realized this with a recent story I was handling, is you're just cyclically writing about stuff. You know, people don't go back and watch YouTube videos from like a year ago, let alone 5. And those who do, I mean, our audience is also cyclical. It's like a revolving door.
Yes.
And so, you know, you end up kind of like wondering, you know, what is the work really that stands the test of time? You know, I read stuff about myself now that's laughable, where it's like, he talks into a webcam 99% of the time. He's not even a real journalist. Like, motherfucker, you've been in this game 5 minutes. You haven't even read any of my work. You know, you don't even know. Let me guess. Never heard of the iBuy Power Throw in 2015. Never heard of the Corey MYM scandal in 2014. Never saw how I broke down the LCS contract. Yeah, never saw none of that, right? Never, you know. So it's absurd, you know. The Echo Fox report and everything, you know, like people are so fresh. They think what I'm doing now is what I've always done and always been. And it's like I've ascended to that thing you were talking about earlier of being the fat, lazy columnist who gets to talk into a webcam for lots of money. You know, that's and I've earned that. It's exhausting doing the type of shit I've done.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
You know, this is great. This is a great gig. But I always do it to myself. I always fuck myself up and come back to the actual hard yards of journalism. Reason I got eyes like piss holes in the fucking snow at the moment is I'm up all night researching all this match fixing stuff that's going on. You know, because I'm still looking for the thing that fixes everything. I'm still looking for the elusive I will fix corruption. You know,
once and for all. Yeah, exactly.
For all. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, just a nonsense, like you tell yourself. I know. Just an absolute fabrication in my diseased brain. But you know, in the meantime, future, you know, in the immediate future, rather, what I need to do is, I want to put something down that's got some permanence. I think I'm at the stage now where I am ready to write the definitive esports book.
You've been threatening for a long time to do it.
Yeah, it's time now. And I had a meeting with my financial manager, pathetic as that sounds, just before this interview. And basically I was like, listen, you know, if can I still do the X, Y, and Z if I just take some time off and go write a book? And they're like, yeah, you know, no bother. I'll probably get an advance on it anyway, so whatever. So, you know, I think I'm gonna bite the bullet and probably start that seriously this year. And, you know, and then I think, you know, I'm going to come back and do some event work this year. Be nice to do the major. It's not a prerequisite, but
sure,
it'd be nice to come back, do that, and then maybe hang it up for good. You know, just have one last shot at the big time, because I think that major will be huge, and I'm hoping it's going to be with all the right people involved. You know, PGL doing it, Sylvie doing it. I'm hoping it's going to be that celebration of Counter-Strike that we've always really wanted, and we've got close to a few times. This could really be it, with everything that's been going on and that, you know, palpable desire for it to be special. And maybe even Valve will feel that way, who knows. So maybe that's something. And then I think the documentaries. Next year, I've sent it to Certo. I want complete creative control and the budget and the team, and no fucking around and no compromise on that. And let me go and make a 30 for 30 esports documentary. I'll make 6 of them. You can keep in mind, the reason they're called 30 for 30 is it's meant to be a different director.
Sure.
I'll do a fucking series of them, all as good. I'll fucking knock it out the park. I got nothing but faith in myself to do that. And then once I've done that, is there anything else left? You know, I've hosted a TV show. I've been an award-winning journalist. I'm a Lifetime Achievement recipient award. I'll have written a book by then. I'll have done a bunch of documentaries by then. How many more avenues is there to explore? Probably not many. So at that point, you know, you have to grow up sometime. And I know I've said this before. I think I even said it in 2012. Right? But, you know, you have to think about getting out and doing something different.
Sure.
And, you know, I think I'm about there. If I hit those beats on the way out and get to do all of that, you know, let someone else have a shot.
Tangential to this, though, last question actually I just thought of now is, because obviously most of our fans are from CS, it's the game that obviously spawned us, etc. Are you someone where, like, if people listen to the rest of this interview, they know you can do any game you want. You could also do things outside of games. Basically, like, the skill set translates. You can obviously be a host. You can even be in a game that you don't know that well. But I know for me personally, I've always said it and I really do believe it. I can work in games like League of Legends and I also almost sort of like it in a way, you know, like I like some things about it, I know enough about it. It'll never be CS though. But I have to say, Quake's not really here anymore. I don't really have like the real StarCraft, you know, like CS is my last real bastion. If CS goes, I'll probably do transition my skill set, man. Maybe I'll do something in esports to pay some of the money, but I'd probably start looking at something. I'd ask myself, what else am I passionate about in life? What else do I really like? And could be anything. Could be fucking UFC or something. Maybe I'll just go and do that. If CSGO, specifically CS, the franchise, wasn't in esports, like let's say it went the way of the Quakes of the world, where it's just not relevant, it's just some fucking sideshow that nowadays, because we don't even have all the games at one event, you're not even at the big events anymore, you're just relegated to fuck knows what. If there was no Counter-Strike, would that hasten your exit from the industry? Is it irrelevant to it? What would you say?
I mean, not really. The games... I know it sounds weird because obviously I do love Counter-Strike, but I can take or leave them. Like, it was always about the people and it was always about helping people first and foremost and trying to keep this industry honest. That was always the goal. The games are relevant. You know, the dirtbags are always going to be there. The bottom feeders are always going to be there. The young adults with the naive, wide-eyed dream of playing video games for a living, turning a passion into a career. You know, they're always going to be there. They're unfortunately the oil, you know, the oil and very often the blood in the machine that, you know, makes the whole thing go around. So, you know, I don't know. I always think about that. You know, where were you when the fun stopped? It's what Hunter S. Thompson wrote, and he was talking about, you know, kind of, you know, how the American dream wasn't really a tangible thing anymore, and you know, we were moving into a dark time in society, and you know, and I think that's kind of how I think it has to be about esports for anybody. You know, like there's got to be a degree of enjoyment. Yeah, it's fucking stressful. Yeah, you're putting out there. Yeah, you're walking a tightrope with the current digital landscape all the time. But it's fucking fun, a lot of it, man. Like, it has been fun. You can't say we haven't had a good time. You know, in the fucking 20 years you've been doing it, 16, 17 years I've been doing it. We've had a fucking good time. We've had some unbelievable moments. And, you know, if those moments aren't there, or it doesn't look like they ever will be, I mean, fuck it. Why would anyone stick around? Because there's other things, man. There's other ways to go and get those hits. So, I mean, for you, I know you're a guy who, like, listen, if the games don't float your boat, yeah, fuck off, go do something else. They'll all celebrate it as a victory when you're gone.
Oh, of course, yeah.
You know.
We finally drove him out. Yeah, of course. I know that.
You'll never be allowed to frame it as being on your terms, but, you know, at the end of the day, what you want to be very cautious of, you and I both, and anyone working in the industry, and anyone just in general listening to this, when you start making decisions about your life based on, well, what will people say if I make this decision? People will say, if I leave this company, people will say I was fired. If I do this interview, people will say I'm a shill.
Yes.
Once you start getting into that mode of thinking, you'll be paralyzed and you'll do nothing and you'll be miserable and you'll be bitter and you'll hate yourself. One of the things that you need to free yourself from is just the liars will lie. It is in their nature. Liars will lie, the delusional will be deluded, and you can only do so much to challenge that. Eventually, you have to put yourself first and let them be that, and you go and be better and happier. So, as long as it's fun, I'll be around. I think once I've achieved everything, all the goals I've set myself, there really is no more fun left to be had, and it's time to find something else fun.
Right, at the end of this interview, as is traditional, do you have any final message or something you want to thank or say hello to?
Just the community that I built up, on my Twitch stream and everything has been, and my Discord. It's been a real. I know you've just recently delved into.
Yeah, I didn't know. I will say, by the way, I actually never really knew what the big deal with that is. Like, I didn't even know, by the way, because I don't reach Twitch. I didn't even know how big by the numbers was in terms of like the loyal people following. So that's actually maybe something that we should address at the end here, because I have to say, one area that me and you also, I think, actually probably our hardest times in esports is when it did feel like it was just me, you, and 2 or 3 other people against everyone, the whole fucking world, because the only messages you're remembering are the horrible ones. But I have to say, there's more than a few cool people out there, actually, isn't there?
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, with everything that I went through and all of the stress and everything else, one thing that was actually good was just being able to throw on the stream and talk to people and seeing 2,000 people come and just listen to me talking shit, drinking scotch at 4 a.m. and seeing the subs go up and seeing 49 months, 52 months. These people have been around for years.
Sure.
They've been following me for years. It's not the biggest community, but I bet if you were to look at the percentage of subs who've been around for a long time and aren't just frivolous, it's a loyal community. And I need, and I know I'll never do this, but I wish I could. I wish I was good enough to do this. Is one of the things that I should do is I engage with the negative people, and it encourages negativity by nature. You give the negative the attention, and more people see, that's how I get attention around these parts. So they engage in negative behavior. This experiment's been done on rats and it works. It's very basic. I've got so many people in my community who've been so supportive, so kind, so generous. Like I feel safe when I do a stream, that I can just be honest and know that people aren't out there to get me, or I've had drunken tearful breakdowns on stream. Obviously, when it happened on the Trainwrecks podcast, no one said, he's going through immense grief and he's probably seriously mentally ill right now, and he's clearly drunk and been awake for days. No one gave a fuck. It was just bear baiting. Throw Richard on a podcast while he's wrecked. He gets upset, because he's going through immense grief and has an argument. No one contextualizes it. He's a piece of shit, But when I stream to my community, everyone's there and everyone's supportive and everyone's nice. And the one thing that's definitely helped me keep my head on is fucking being able to do that, knowing I've got that loyal community, being able to hang out on a Discord, having them crowdsource all of the work, having graphic designers help me improve the quality of my content with thumbnail game, meeting people like Chloe, animators who are now doing stuff for ESL, and just seeing how we've all grown older together. It's a nice feeling, and I recommend that to anyone. I think you're finding it out, that
for sure.
Have your own little enclave. Nothing wrong with that. They say, you're retreating into an echo chamber. Fuck that. I've got a community that actually genuinely likes me, likes my work, and is very supportive of what I do. Not many people get that in their lifetime. It's a gift. It's something you should cherish. So yeah, that's been the big takeaway for me the last year. That I used to say, and I've said it in interviews with you before, I used to reject all the feedback from everyone. Like fucking, just to get a Rick and Morty reference.
Sure.
In, that bit where he goes, your boos mean nothing. I see what makes you cheer. I often have that derisory, I've often held that derisory outlook, but no, my community's been a tonic to me, and it's probably the thing that's actually sustained my ability to keep going. And I think no matter what happens, in terms of my esports output, I'll always be willing to throw the stream on and talk about shit with a cup of coffee or a beer, and I know those guys will turn up to hear it, and that's just amazing.
This video was kindly supported by Bobby, Lager15, Pronogo, Zachary Carter, Andrew, Alexander Rao, Andreas Kroknes, Animosity, Dean Tanglis, ErikHillestad, Hades, Jdubs, Jensen Goh, Tobias Bernasconi, Zyrathenia, Zoomba, and as always, a special thanks goes out to Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my shows? Do you want to ask a question for my monthly video AMA? Want teasers for who's coming up on my content? Or do you even want to take part in one of those exclusive discussions with me about esports? If so, put your money where your mouth is and join the Illuminati today via the Patreon link in the description box below.